Welcome to the AYP News Show, where Marc Silber dives into the latest photography news.
What's first up?
All right, our first story is a little bit of kind of a community news, but recently there was an article that came out, and I believe it was originally on the Wired, reported this, and there's some historians who are not a big fan of upscaling and colorizing photos and videos. So just to kind of give an example, I'll just, play this while we're talking about it. So you can see, that's the original footage. It's so small because, they weren't shooting in 1080.
That's
So
like 8mm or something.
yeah. And so, there are people who like to, colorize and upscale to 4K.
Yeah.
And there are some historians who don't really like this because they say that it's not really getting more to the truth because you're adding things that weren't there. And especially because they're like, it wasn't made with the intention to be 4K in color.
I think that we've got history there on our side. This is what the art form looked like. Let's keep it that way. What do you guys think? I mean, I'm a purist, so maybe my vote doesn't really count here. But this example, come on.
Yeah.
Dorothea Lange, she shot that with, I believe, an 8x10. Maybe it was a 4x5, black and white. It's just, an indelible image that's going to live on forever. And your whole focus is really on the composition rather than on, was her skin color that, why are these clothes tan? It just sort of puts a layer of question marks in my mind, and I'm not a fan. But what do you guys think? All right, what's this?
So this is about in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, there was a photographer who early on his roommate had COVID early on in the pandemic. And so he was quarantined and he would go up to his roof. And he started noticing that there were people who would hang out on their roofs a lot more than usual, trying to escape from, being stuck inside all day, what, many of us have done. So he created a photo series, which he's now going to be turning into a book.
I love this composition. I mean, look at it. It's got multi-layers here. And you've got the, Empire State Building in the background, the birds flying, another layer, and then the people sitting, one guy sitting, one guy standing, and it's how he framed it is pretty cool. He just moved around until he got them right on the edges. But when Jared and I were talking about this, one of the things I really like about it, keep showing if you can some of these other ones. What I liked about it is I'm always interested with you guys in finding things that you can do right from your own home. And this is just an example. You may not have a rooftop. So I'd like you guys to think about how you could translate this into wherever you are. Okay, shooting. We've seen the example of the guy that shot through his front door.
Yep.
Remember that? Now we've got this guy shooting from a rooftop.
We saw a guy who was doing abandoned buildings.
So, these are kind of everyday things that we could all be shooting from. Okay, what's next?
All right, we've got some sad news for the film lovers of the world. You want to talk about this more since you were the one that saw this story?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so SLR means a single lens reflex, meaning there's no D in front of it. It's film. And the F series was the most go-to 35 millimeter camera, I believe, of all time. We've gone through different eras where, you have Leica, obviously, is a classic. Canon and Nikon keep trading back and forth. But the Nikon F was the go-to camera that you saw around every major, photographer for National Geographic, Life magazine, whatever. Anyway, this is the end of an era. Frankly, I've got to admit that I didn't even know they were still producing this camera. I'm so caught up in the digital age that, I don't own a Nikon F6. I did own a Nikon F for sure. It was stolen, unfortunately. It is kind of a rite of passage here to see this is in a kind of a negative way to see this camera disappearing. I don't know how many brand new film cameras you can even buy. Fortunately, you can find these on eBay, or there's better ways to buy them. But I know that B&H is a great source for used cameras because they've checked them out, and you get a 30-day warranty on it. So definitely do your own checking before you let those 30 days go by. I had to send one back that had some light leaks once. But anyway, what do you guys think? I'm curious, how many of you are shooting with film and or want to and need to get a hold of a film camera?
You and I talked about this when I brought it up.
Yeah.
So there's a new photography network company called Snappr. I hadn't heard of this, but apparently they raised $10 million. And it sounds like essentially they're kind of a business-to-business entrepreneur sort of thing, similar to like, Airbnb and
They're
stuff.
like into
basically a
Airbnb
company,
or Uber, right? How come?
so a company can basically, hire photographers through this network and get who they want. So it's like, I want somebody who can do menu. I need somebody who can shoot for menus. They give that as an example. For example, Snappr has taken the menu photos of 12% of U.S. restaurants.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they're looking for with this kind of a business. And I know, Mark, you definitely had thoughts on this. We'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this kind of a business model. So while Mark's talking, let us know what you think. But Mark, what are your initial thoughts when you hear
my
about such a
initial
system?
thoughts are I'm not keen on this at all. I feel like this is another opportunity to cut prices for photography.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing we need right now is to keep cutting, So, hey, instead of hiring a pro like Bob Holmes to shoot your vineyard, I'm going to get this guy for $300 a day to go out. No, thank you. That's just kind of like another way of cheapening the subject. So that's my initial thought. Maybe I'm old school, but I'm not going to give up that point of view. Every one of these disruptions does make changes that are felt by the people who have been at it for a long time. Now, listen, I'm not a big fan of riding around in cabs, and I do use Uber as opposed to taking a cab, but it totally disrupted those guys who spent the money, took the time. It's expensive to get, what do you call the cab? Not token, but you have to buy. You buy
the
into
cab.
it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
like you have to buy to be a cab driver. There's a special,
Yeah, you guys can remind us what that is. So those guys spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and bam, they're just completely disrupted. Airbnb is disrupted, the lodging industry. And I'm afraid that this is designed to disrupt the pro photographer. I'm not a fan. Sorry. No, thank you.
I think
thumbs down. 2 thumbs down.
The problem is this could be really good if this was a way for like small businesses that don't have a whole bunch of contacts, and getting in touch with like new starting up photographers. That's one thing, but that like the big companies are going to be using this too.
Exactly.
And they're going to completely abuse the system.
Here's the problem, guys. You have people who have invested years and years and years into their talent. I know when I go out and do, commercial bidding on a project, not often, but sometimes somebody will come up and say, "Oh, Mark, you want many thousands of dollars for this, but I have a brother or cousin. I have this guy I can hire off of Craigslist to do it for $500. And I go, "Well, good luck with that."
Yeah, you're going to get $500 worth.
Also, one of the things we do is we stand by our work. So if somebody years later calls us up and says, "Hey, I need you to re-edit because I've changed the, this or that," we keep that footage around, and we will give, we do the re-edit. And that's something you're not going to find in the cheap end of things. They're moving on to something else. So
So Adobe Max has their big conference
Oh,
coming
yeah.
at the end of this month, and friend of the show, Annie Leibovitz, is going to be a part of that.
Annie Leibovitz and I, you can scroll down there. There's a little more info there about her.
Yeah, I
So
was
she and I
gonna.
went to the San Francisco Art Institute at the same time. She was a couple of years older than I was. So, in those days that meant a lot. But we met each other since then and talked about those days. So this is coming up for the first time. They used to charge for this. Now it's free.
Yep.
And what are the dates on that, Jared? If you go up there, I
The
think.
dates are October 20th to the 22nd. In our in memory section, we've got Joseph Bartschener. I believe that's how you say his name. But he was a conceptual photographer, and he did a lot of really interesting, really blending like physical art and photography together in a lot of ways. His most famous project was Obituary, which is where he took, and we can see another photo here, where he took the New York Times front page cover of every time that it had an obituary on the front cover, and it showed it. Here's a description. The work is like some form of a cemetery with the newspapers arrayed like gravestones in orderly row.
Wow.
So he did a lot to really blend conceptual photography, and he also had a series called Forest, where he would go over and over again to a particular section of New England woods over a decade, it looks like.
And that's just this point alone is a really good point in your photography is to go back to places that you have shot.
We like to end on something light in these trying times. So we've got 14 finalists from the 2020 Comedy Pet Photo Awards. So just,
Look at some of these. These are pretty cute.
yeah, some great Gossip Girls is the
I
name
love
of
that.
this photo. I
That's
love
a
this
great.
cat.
Yeah.
I grew up with 3 cats, and my parents still one of them they still have, and then they've gotten another one since. And cats are just so expressive sometimes.
Yep. I think these are really amazing. How they look at that.
Yeah. So definitely check these out. This is from Peter Pixel. Once again, link in the description. Isolated dog.
And this is again another thing you guys can do from your own home. Make sure that's funny. Make sure you're making your pets portraits. I just want to remind you that if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and enable the bell. It really means a lot to me to have you guys on board with us. And I love reading your comments. You notice that Jared and I pretty much try to reply to every one of them. Even if it's just a thumbs up or a thank you or whatever, just so you know we're there reading your comments. But leave them. It's really important for you because you can have a two-way communication with us. Or you're not just going to say something and have it drift off into the atmosphere. We'll reply. Subscribe, leave your comments, share. I love it when you guys share. And of course, like. And remember, if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. And along with that, say this with me. Remember to get out and capture your own images of life. Love you guys. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow. Stay tuned for a lot more with AYP.